Hi, I'm Carol Burton, and I wrote Burton Reading. Much has been said about phonics and its importance. There's been actually a big battle around phonics for a long time. I think it kind of came when the public school system took phonics out for a while, and then as a reaction, I think a lot of people, especially homeschoolers and so forth, kind of pulled it back in. So there's been a lot of unrest and misunderstanding about phonics. Phonics is very important. There's no question about it. To be a good reader, you're going to have to understand about letters, that letters make sounds, that when you put them together, sometimes it makes blends and so forth. You have to understand about the sounds. But I want to say right here at the beginning, the goal of teaching phonics is not to know phonics. The goal of teaching reading, no matter what you're teaching, is in order to be able to pick up a book, read it, understand it, enjoy it. Reading it, comprehending what those marks on the page say, that's the goal. So I think we've gotten a little confused on that. I think, and the reason I say that is because there's a lot of kids. I go to a lot of conferences around different places, and I talk to lots of parents and children. I cannot tell you how many children who have used phonics and know a gazillion phonics rules, but when you pick up a book, they're not a good reader. So they didn't somehow understand that learning phonics is all for the purpose of reading a book. The goal of everything we do should be that goal. A lot of children have been taught phonics and are struggling readers today. That's not a hollow accusation. It's just the truth. I sit and listen over and over and over. I had just within the last 2 weeks, I was at a conference on the East Coast, and a lady was in one of my workshops on struggling readers, and she said she had a 13-year-old child who still couldn't read very well. And I said, what have you used? She said, I've used 5 different strong phonics programs and nothing has worked. Okay, people, phonics only doesn't work on all children. Now listen to what I said there. Phonics only doesn't work on all children. Now, I've also met lots of kids who've used a phonics only program and are reading quite well. Unfortunately, the truth of the matter is there are a lot of children. Actually, when I was teaching, I used to say for every about 20 kids, there'll be about 3 or 4 that in spite of anything I do or don't do, they're going to learn to read. I could probably send them down to help the cooks get lunch instead of teaching, and they would somehow learn to read. And again, I have people come along and they're saying, well, I had one child and I taught them, I don't know what I did. They just started reading. I don't know what but now this one isn't reading. You know, it's like some children will learn in spite of anything we use, but not all children will. And phonics only will not work on all children. So if you want to be sure that your child is a good reader, you better put more in it than phonics just to make sure. And also, all phonics programs are not alike. Just because I put the word phonics on the front of a curriculum doesn't mean that it's a good program, because there's different kind of phonics. And I want to tell you about Burton Reading phonics because I believe it's an efficient phonics. I believe that because I've used it and seen it be used with hundreds of children over many, many, many years, and it works. It works. Here's what Burton Reading phonics, kind of an overview of what it looks like. First of all, I begin with lowercase letters. Whoa, that's a no-no right there, isn't it? Everybody starts with capitals. As a matter of fact, I defy you to try to go find some magnetic letters that are lowercase. You have to special order them most of the time. If you look on television, it's all these teaching children to read with capital letters. I've got a problem with that because when they open up a book, guess what they see? Lowercase letters. So I start with lowercase letters. Out of the 26 letters, 10 of them look just like the capitals, so that only leaves a few capitals that they still have to learn. But I start with lowercase. Why? Because everything I do is for the purpose of picking up a book and reading it. So from day one in my program, they're reading a book. It's got lowercase letters in there. We got to learn those. Now, what we do, we start by teaching the letter, name, and I give a picture to it and a sound. Now, you're familiar with this. A for apple, okay. And you probably know C is for cat. I don't know. L is for lion or something like that. I have a problem with that too. And I had a problem with it for many years until I found one picture alphabet that worked. Otherwise, I was going to have to make my own, and my artistic skills are not good. I'm glad I found one. She's a lady in Canada, and I have to special order it. In my program, I tell you how to get a hold of it. But what makes it different is this. If we're going to teach the letter B, the picture is a bat and a baseball. B, a bat and a ball. Now, it looks like a bat and a ball. And when we're teaching it, if you're going left to right, boom, you hit the bat first. So it's a bat and a ball. That's a B. If it's a C we're going to teach, that doesn't look like a cat to me. But when in my alphabet, that's called a cookie, and it's got a big bite taken out of it, the picture is. So when I look at the letter, it looks like the picture. It's a cookie. It helps children learn. Another example is J. I'm not going to use Jack in the Box. I'm not going to use Juniper Tree or something. This looks like, and the picture is a girl, a basketball player, and she's jumping up, her feet are up, and there's the ball, and she's jumping. So when they look at the J, it looks like jumping that says jump. So we learn their letters, names, and sounds. That's very important. Children have to know that. Then I begin to teach blends. That means that I'm going to teach them to say the beginning blend of a word, whether it's one letter, two letters, or three letters. There's very few things about the English language that's 100% true. But one of them that's always going to work is that when you come to a word, you say the beginning sound. The beginning sound are those letters that go up to and bump into the first vowel. It might be S in the word sing. It might be ST in the word sting. And it might be STR, stir, in the word string. But 1, 2, or 3 letters at the beginning. Now here's how my program differs from some. There's a lot of programs, for example, that if they're going to teach the blends here, they would go A, E, I, O, U. They would say, okay, we say ba, ba, bi, ba, ba. They always include the first vowel along with the beginning blend. I got a problem with that, and here's my problem. If they come to a word like this, do I want them to say ba, or do I want them to begin with b? To me, that's a no-brainer. It doesn't include that. When I come to this word, do I want them to say cat, or do I want them to say k? To me, that's a no-brainer. You don't include that beginning, that first vowel. You just go up to it. So that's the way I teach it. By the way, that's why I use red and blue magnetic letters, so that the vowels stick out and they begin to understand that. When we learn the letters at the very beginning, we clap on the vowels so that we really begin to understand which ones are the vowels. And that you stop at the vowel for the beginning sound. Then, after the beginning sound, I teach blend chunks. Now, blend chunks vowel chunks. I don't know what I'm saying here. Vowel chunks. That means that after they say the beginning sound, they're going to look at that first vowel, but they're going to look for the biggest chunk they know. Now, in this particular word, it would be k, and then the vowel chunk would be AR, car, R, because AR says R. So that's how they remember that. Now, the way they learn these vowel chunks is different too. I don't teach a bunch of rules that they have to. They're reading along, they got to get out of the text, they got to think of the rule, apply it, and come back in. No, I want them to learn by analogy. And another easier way of thinking about that, I want them to learn to use what they know to get to what they don't know. That's a very efficient way of reading. That's what good readers do. So if, I can't even write upside down here. If the word is, and they know the word see, that's one of the words they've learned, then they quickly learn that EE says E like in see. AR says R like in car. OY says oi like in boy. EA says E like in eat. That's how they learn it, by analogy. They start with what they know, and they learn how to use the pieces to get to something they don't know. So I'm going to just move those over just a little bit here, get rid of those. So when my students come to a word like this, they will not go, ah, yes. They will not spit and sputter through that. They're going to see oi like in boy, st, and an because they know that chunk. Oyster. 3 chunks and they've got it. And I'll tell you something, if they're reading for meaning, which my students are encouraged to do, they're going to say oyster. It'll just fall right out of their mouth by the time they get about 2 chunks said. But they learn to look on through and check themselves. Now, if the word is starting, please excuse this handwriting, I'm upside down. My kids will not ever go they're not going to spit and sputter. They're going to see the st. Some of them will see the R like in cart-ing, starting. Some of them, but because they're going to be trained to look at the biggest chunk, if they already know the word art, they're going to say starting. They're always looking after the beginning blend to the biggest chunk. That, my friends, is efficient phonics, and it'll get them a long way. That's what good readers mostly do. They need to be freed up to use these. Now, what about the things that don't match what they know? And in English, none of these vowel chunks are always going to be absolute. Well, they have to learn early that these vowels, these red things over here, they're tricky. And you got to be flexible with them. So when they first start learning their letters, they learn how, if you're going through a drilling cards, seek, teat, but if they get to a vowel, they clap. Because they know, and same thing with Y. As a matter of fact, with Y, they'll clap several times because it's really tricky. It pretends to be other things. They're going to learn that those 6 letters are very tricky, and you have to be flexible. This usually says A, but sometimes it says A, and sometimes it says and so forth. So you have to be understanding that you got to be flexible. So if one of my students came to the word beautiful and they didn't know that word, they're reading, or even if it's just in a list, they're going to see the B. Well, they'll do it several ways. They might see the B. They might see the B-E here. So it'd be E, beautiful, beautiful. They're going to flip that right over because they don't know a word called beautiful. It's be beautiful. It flipped over and said its name. That is so much more efficient than having to dig around for rules that aren't going to fit anyway. And if they're reading for meaning in a book, it's even more easy to do. So I teach a very efficient type of phonics. Why? Because my goal is not to learn a bunch of neat rules that don't ever always work, and that makes it seem like those rules are the most important thing. No. My goal is to teach you how to use sounds and these letters, put them together, take them apart, whatever you have to do, flip them over, be flexible, and read for meaning. It's a very efficient way of reading. That's what good readers do. They're reading for meaning. Now, when I'm talking about this, I always have to do this. Vowels are tricky, but we place in phonics, some programs place so much emphasis on the vowel. I want you to look at this. Leanne, can they get this? I'm going to give you a minute. I know I've tried this with lots of people. They can read this. You try it. I'll give you about 30 seconds to tell me, they're at home, what is it saying? I don't know if that's 30 seconds. It seems like forever. What does that say? When you read for meaning, you don't need many vowels. But you can't read without consonants. People, vowels aren't that awful critical if you're reading for meaning. Do you get my drift? So I'm not going to waste a lot of silly time learning about things that aren't that important. Are they? Do you need to know about vowels? Of course. But they need to learn how to be flexible and efficient with it. Now, finally, I want to tell you the story about little Sylvia. Sylvia was a little kindergartner who began her lesson. She was one of my pilot groups, and so we tested her at the beginning of the school year, and she tested like most beginning kindergartners. She was young for her age. She didn't know anything, which is exactly where I want them when they begin Burton Reading, because then you teach them correctly. But she didn't know anything, so her mother didn't think she was really scared. She said, I don't know if I can do this. But I said, if you will just follow my program, listen, take my training, do it what I'm asking you, I'm going to support you all along the way, it's going to be easy. She went through 10 units. Now, each of my units are 5 lessons, so it was about 10 weeks into the program. And I got a call, and her husband had been transferred to Ireland, and they were going to have to fly over, check it out, come back, pack up, and leave, and so forth. So I said, okay, she's only had 10 units, but bring her in and let's test her, because I may not get to test her at the end, and as a pilot group, I want to have some information and some data. So I had her come over, and one of my, I always have experts or university professors do my testing, so I had one of them come in and they tested her. That little girl was reading, well, we stopped at about mid-3rd grade level, and I finally stopped it because it had been about a half hour, and she's just a little bitty thing. She looks like she doesn't hardly have a diaper. She was really little. And I said, that's enough for me to know she knows how to read. She could read anything that she understood. Now, she wouldn't probably read a medical textbook, but things that she understood, she was reading. And I then later asked her mother, she's through 1st grade and into 2nd grade now, and I've asked her mother how she's doing. Well, she said she's doing really well. They only did a couple more units up through about 12 or 13, and then she said she just knew everything. And so they went on, and in 1st grade they used a standard curriculum. The only complaint was, not my curriculum, but just a regular curriculum, was that she thought it was too easy. She was kind of bored with it. But as I analyzed that, I know that little Sylvia would have been one of those kids that learned in the janitor's closet. There's no question about it. But I doubt if she could have learned in 10 weeks like she did. And I know what she did. that little girl went through and she learned her beginning sound, she learned her blends, she learned her reading strategies, which we teach about how to read a book and how to always say the beginning sound and think what makes sense and read for meaning and da 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 da. She had about 10 chunks that she'd learned. Now, we teach a lot of chunks, because there's lots of different vowel combinations. But she knew E like in C and ing, and she knew R like in car and oi, and she knew about 10. But what that little girl was able to do was understand, okay, I understand how you figure out those chunks. You take what you know, you apply it to what you don't know. That's all she needed to know, and off she went. I am so proud of my students, and I get emails and talk to people all the time that this is working beautifully for their children. Some children need the whole program and need each one to be taught. That's fine, but some of them don't. None of them are harmed by my program, by the way, but they all learn how to efficiently read a book and enjoy it. And I am so proud of that. And I'm very passionate about trying to stop the struggling reader syndrome that we have going on in this country. They're everywhere. They're in public schools, they're in private schools, they're in e-schools. Struggling readers are in Christian schools, they're in homeschools. I go to conventions and hear them all the time. Parents who are doing their very best, but they have struggling readers. We have got to stop this. And one of the biggest ways we can do it is to stop the phonics only thinking. Phonics is important. Efficient phonics is very important, but that's not everything. We must always be teaching them how to read a book. Sight words and phonics, that only just so that you can read this book. Reading for meaning is top on the priority list. And I've watched over and over people use my program, and they have wonderful readers. Struggling readers don't exist when they use my program, if you want to know the truth. And I'm out on a campaign to stop struggling readers. And that means start them right, teach them phonics, but teach them an efficient phonics, and don't teach them phonics only.